And before we move on, I'd like to do land recognition for the Algonquin Nation. Ottawa is located on unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Host Nation. The peoples of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Host Nation have lived on this territory for millennia. Today, Ottawa is home to approximately 40,000 First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. La communauté autochtone d'Ottawa est diverse et représentée de nombreuses nations, langues et coutumes. La ville rend hommage au territoire des premiers peuples, ainsi qu'à l'ensemble des membres des Premières Nations, des Inuits et des Métis d'Ottawa, de même qu'à leurs précieuses contributions passées et présentes à ce territoire. Next slide, please. Before I get to the introduction, I'm just going to add two other things. This session is being recorded twice, one for internal purposes for Alain and his team to look back on, and one by the councillor's offices so they can post it on their own personal social media means. That being said, in the room here, or in the Zoom room here, we have 6 councillors listening to everything that's happening here this evening. We have Councillor Mathieu Fleury from Ward 12. Thank you, Councillor. We have Councillor Teresa Kavanaugh, Councillor Ralston King. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Jeff Leeper. There he is. Councillor Sean Menard. And Councillor Catherine McKenney. Thank you, councillors, for being here. As well, we have the head planner on the new OP, Alain Migueles. He center screen there for you. And also myself, Andy Reside, and Charmaine Fortney, who will be the moderator for our moderated Q&A session. Next slide, please. So for the agenda, l'ordre du jour, we have our welcomes and introductions. We have our opening remarks, mot d'ouvert. Those are from the councillors. We have context and policy overview from Alain Migueles. We have our questions and answer period. We'll hear from you and get the answers to your questions, and then closing remarks from some councillors as well. And before we move on, the question and answer period, you can ask your questions in the language of your choice. Alain is able to answer and or listen and answer in both French and English, as well myself, I can translate as necessary. And if there's any media present, please send me a message in the chat, either to questions for Charmaine or to IT support, and we will direct you to the place where you can ask your questions. And before I move on, I'm going to ask that Councillor McKenney unmute their mic, and Mike, if you can unshare your screen, so Councillor McKenney can have their opening remarks. Councillor McKenney.
Thank you. Thanks for everyone for being here. We decided amongst ourselves that we wanted to engage people who live in the city, who are residents of the city, who are renters. We often hear from residents through community associations and different venues from homeowners, but it's important that we understand the needs of people who choose to rent in the city. In the downtown, the majority of people, residents that I represent, live in multi-residential units, and most of them are renters. And it's important that we understand what kind of city you're looking for, what you're looking for in terms of affordability, housing, the types of housing that you're looking at, what you need in terms of green space and parks, what your children need in terms of parks and recreation programming, how you need to move around the city, and just in terms of how the city grows is essential for us to understand from everyone across the city. So I welcome you all here tonight. I'm not going to take a lot of time because I want to hear from you what it is that you need as we plan out how we build the city, we fund the city, how we manage the city in terms of built form, transportation, parks and recreation, everything that feeds into the official plan starts here, starts with our big moves and moves into the details of the official plan. So welcome everyone, and I look forward to the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor McKenney, for those remarks. And now, maintenant, je vais demander à conseiller Mathieu Fleury pour votre commentaire. Conseiller.
Good evening, everyone. Bonsoir à tous. I want to begin by recognizing someone's special birthday. Councillor McKenney, whose birthday is this evening, is joining us on this important session. And I know that Catherine, because we work closely together, is passionate about housing, passionate about affordable housing, passionate about our city. So I know that you haven't said that, Catherine, but I know that you're very interested in this evening. And I want you to know, everyone that's listening, that the 6 councillors that have joined this evening really care about the session. We're really interested in your feedback. The official plan, as Catherine highlighting, really sets the fundamentals of a lot of things that the city will be doing over the coming years. Comme vous le savez sans doute, les grandes municipalités canadiennes qui ont beaucoup de difficultés au niveau du logement. Il y a beaucoup de crises du logement. Puis le lien est beaucoup avec l'achat de propriété. Et quand on voit l'unique grande ville canadienne où il y a beaucoup de locations, Montréal, on voit comment la capacité de diversifier le stock, de moderniser le stock, de créer différents niveaux d'abordabilité est disponible. I too want to hear this evening what amongst the renters is the most important in terms of the future built form of our city. Where would you like to live? How does that look like? How does renting look like today, and how could that be improved over the years when we talk about when we talk about the built form? Really looking forward to this evening. I am a firm believer that we need to reset the balance around housing and really see a lot more rental housing, which creates a lot more opportunities, that you be a senior, that you be low income, that you be a newcomer, that you be family, that you be, well, you should have options to rent in our city across all neighborhoods. So we want to hear from you this evening. We want to know what's top of mind. We've heard from property owners on a number of fronts, and now it's this evening, it's the renters. Please participate, please come at it, and we certainly want to thank you for taking the time this evening. Now I'll pass it over to my friend and colleague, Councillor King, to wrap up the beginning, and I think after that it turns to you, Alain.
Well, wonderful. Well, thank you, and good evening, everybody. I'd also like to acknowledge the Indigenous peoples of all the lands that we are on today, which is the traditional territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people. While we meet today on a virtual platform, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the importance of the lands which we call home. We do this to reaffirm our commitment and our responsibility in providing relationships between nations and to improve our understanding of local Indigenous peoples and their culture, especially in light of the horrible discovery of 215 children at Kamloops, which especially emphasizes the need for truth, reconciliation, and action. Action for cities emanates from its official plan, which ultimately is its official blueprint. So it is absolutely important to hear from you as the plan sets strategic long-term goals for the community. The plan not only has impact on landowners, it also impacts everyone, including renters. And this is especially important to me as being the child of immigrants. I grew up in apartment buildings and in rental type of developments for the first 28 years of my life. So I understand that the impacts to renters are very important, and often we know that renters spend a higher proportion of income on their housing needs. So it's absolutely important to have a plan that addresses where new affordable housing will go, as well as industries, offices, shops, where they'll be located, and when and how development is going to occur. What types of services we need, whether that's transportation, water mains, sewers, parks, recreations, and schools, along with the need for comprehensive land use policies. And so these elements are as important in terms of your comments as other property owners and managers within the city. So as a consequence, it is important to hear your concerns, especially as we entertain the prospect of 15-minute neighborhoods. And so that's why I'm so gratified and pleased that you're with us tonight and you're participating. I'd like to, on behalf of everybody as well, thank staff for creating this opportunity, as well as my councillor colleagues. We look forward to your comments, and happy birthday, Catherine.
Thank you very much, Councillor, and all councillors for your opening comments. And with that, I will pass it to Alain Miguez for his presentation. Alain?
Thanks, Andy. Merci, messieurs les conseillers, et bonsoir à tous, messieurs, mesdames. Good evening, everyone. My name is Alain Miguez. I'm the Manager of Planning Policy and Resiliency here at the city. My team is preparing the official plan, the new official plan that you may have had a chance to see. What I'd like to do is give you an overview of what you can expect to read in the official plan. And I would also like to maybe highlight a few of the ways in which we think the new official plan is an improvement on the existing official plan. As Councillors King and Fleury have pointed out, we do have a housing emergency, and Council actually declared a housing emergency. It's not only for ownership housing, it's actually for all types of housing. Councillor Fleury mentioned Montreal. Statistically, Ottawa is second after Montreal for the highest percentage of households who rent. More than a third of all households in Ottawa rent their homes. So we're second after Montreal among all Canadian big cities. So it's a very major issue for Ottawa. And we've always said that in order for Ottawa to stay competitive, we need a healthy housing market and a healthy rental market. That's how the city can breathe, not just economically, but socially as well. So let's get started. Next slide, please. So if you've been following along, the new official plan that we've presented basically sits on what we call the 5 big moves. So the 5 big moves are the main principles on which we want to grow the city for the next quarter century. And each of those is a big move for a city like Ottawa. The first one, as you'll remember, was that we want more growth through intensification than through suburban expansion. And that was a big move because up until now, it's been the other way around. It's been most growth through suburban expansion and will encourage intensification. The city is making this move for a number of reasons, obviously affordability, but also from an equity perspective, mixed neighborhoods are much more preferable than segregated neighborhoods. And we do have a legacy of urban planning from the 20th century that has focused a lot on segregation of what we call land uses. So all the houses here, all the stores here, all the parks here, all the malls here, all the jobs here. And now we're trying to think of the city more as an integrated community, and that includes housing. The second big move that is very tied to the first is mobility. We want more than half of all trips in the city to be through sustainable modes. So that's transit for longer distances, cycling and walking in the neighborhood for shorter distances. And again, that's much part of the equity that we want to improve upon in the city. Public transit is public space, and so is the street, and so is the sidewalk. And to have more people participating and taking ownership of public space and of mobility is something that we feel very strongly is going to improve equity for everybody in the city. Affordability is very much part of our third big move, which is resiliency writ large. For the city to be resilient, it has to have opportunities for everybody across the spectrum. So you're going to see in the official plan a number of policies, and I'll walk through those that focus on that specifically. I'm going to talk about types of housing, and I'm going to talk about some of the renter protection policies that we're proposing in the official plan. Next slide, please. So next slide, please. All right, so in terms of mobility, I think one of the things that is very important for us to talk about is the whole concept of affordability usually is understood in very simple terms as meaning, what does the housing cost? What does it cost either to rent or to buy a house? But in this official plan, we started to broaden the definition of affordability. And we include in the definition of affordability transportation to and from whatever housing people are in. And it makes a big difference if people are in neighborhoods where they can viably function foot or by transit, or if they are at a location that forces them to own and operate a private vehicle. So a private vehicle is a big hit on a family budget, and we want the city to offer residential opportunities to people in neighborhoods where it's possible to function without the need to operate a private vehicle. People have the choice to do it, but if it's a need, then it starts to become inequitable. It is a hit on a family budget, and it starts to distort the housing market as a whole. So you're going to find a number of policies in the official plan with respect to mobility. There's a call for a major shift to reduce car dependency and to start to really increase sustainable modes of transportation. The way we do that is we've mapped the city in concentric circles, and we want to have the right policies for the right areas. Downtown core is a very particular context. The inner urban area, where a lot of the existing 15-minute neighborhoods already work well, but they're getting very expensive because of how popular many of them are. That's another context. The outer urban, which is about to get a lot of transit with stage 2. That's a completely new context for us to wrap our minds around. And then the suburban areas, which with the transitway have developed very good transit to and from downtown, but not necessarily within the neighborhoods in each of the suburban communities. We also have new policies to continue the work we started on complete streets and to better balance the distribution of space on a street between all users. Next slide, please. So, as I said, we want a broader understanding of affordability. There's another distinction that we introduce in the new official plan. The current official plan talks about affordability for up to the 30th income percentile. And up to the 30th income percentile usually falls also under the city's housing and homelessness plan, because that is housing that requires subsidy, typically. The new official plan now starts to talk about housing for the 30th to 60th income percentile, which represents an increasing number of people that are really having a tough time making ends meet, and where the cost of housing is really taking off and leaving people behind. So we have that new definition. Again, some of the things that we want to do in the official plan is to encourage the construction of new housing, new rental housing. So there's a number of ways that we do that. We have permitted for a long time in the city secondary dwelling units, so you can add an apartment to an existing house. We were the first in Ontario to allow coach houses, and so far the rule was you do either one or the other. In the new official plan, you're allowed to do both. You're allowed to do a coach house and add an apartment to a house. The other thing that's really important is, and this is something that's perhaps a big contrast with what you might see on TV from American shows. Our official plan doesn't talk about renters and owners. We talk about housing, and we don't distinguish between tenure, for the simple reason that we don't want to discriminate. There's nothing in the official plan that would say rental housing is allowed here or is not allowed here. We're talking about housing, and it doesn't matter if people own it or rent it. What we do want to make sure is happening is that we are setting out the rules that will allow for the construction of housing that is rented. So I talked about secondary dwelling units, but we've also introduced a number of policies that are going to open the door to what we call the missing middle of housing, which is low-rise buildings that fit well into neighborhoods that can be ground-oriented, where people have a yard to play outside, but there's multiple dwelling units inside the building. So far, we've been doing well in some areas of the city, but we want to expand the geography of the city where those choices are going to be available. Next slide, please. There's a number of other policies that support this. I seem to be one slide ahead of myself with these, but we also are increasing our attention to things like better bike parking and either low or no car parking requirements, for the simple reason that Parking is very expensive to build. It takes a lot of space if it's on the surface of a piece of land. And that cost gets passed on to rent. So we're not saying that people are not allowed to develop rental housing with parking, but we're also giving the opportunity for rental housing to be developed without parking so that the cost of those apartments is less. And in areas that have good transit service, good bus service, O-train service, or are walkable to main streets, we've already seen quite a number of those apartment buildings with no parking get built. The good thing about it is they don't generate traffic because tenants who rent those units, they know that there's no parking, and therefore it's typically tenants with no cars. And they fit really well into neighborhoods. There's no driveway, there's no extra pavement. The trees get to stay on the piece of land. So there's a number of policies that start to connect in terms of how we build the city. Next slide, please. Now, with respect to conversions and control of existing tenants, in our existing official plan, we have policies that control the conversion of rental housing to condominium. And the rule is you can't unless the vacancy rate is high and unless the apartments are rented at or above the average as tracked by CMHC in any particular zone. What we're adding in this official plan is a new policy that will allow the city to develop a protocol to protect tenants in case of demolition. We've had a couple of high-profile examples in the city where that became an issue. So we want the next official plan to be ready and to have protocols in place so that if a rental building is demolished, that the tenants get rehoused. The tenants get rehoused or get to come back to the new building at the same rent and in an apartment of the same type. So the policy is going to be there to allow the city to put that in place, and there will be a whole project to talk about the details of how that's going to be put in place. Next slide, please. And maybe just before we go, I know that there may be questions about Airbnb. So the city just adopted a short-term rental bylaw. This is something that also had started to eat at our rental supply. I can answer basic questions about that. I'm not an expert on the bylaw, but I know that it's in connection with work that we've done in our department to make sure that we're protecting the rental stock of the city. So thanks for your attention and happy to take questions. Merci beaucoup.
Merci, Alain. Thank you so much. And now it's time for the question and answer. As mentioned, please ask your question in your language of choice, either French or English, and we'll be happy to answer. If you want to, if instead of raising your hands electronically, you can just do the old-fashioned wave and I'll be looking for you for a question, or you can just send it to me in the chat and I'll ensure that you get your question answered as well. So I do see a hand up, and I did see, I see Anne there waving, so you're on my queue as well. Okay, Norma?
Yes, hi, thank you. I have a comment about the transportation and what's going on with affordable transportation. My daughter, I live in the West End, I live in the Bayshore area, and my daughter is hearing impaired, which means very often I have to take her to CHIO. We normally take the bus and now LRT. But it still ends up an entire day trip, most of which is spent on a bus. Is there any sort of plan to help residents who live further away get to our children's hospital? It is a very, very wonderful children's hospital, but it is difficult to access transportation to get from West End and other neighborhoods.
Thanks for the question. So depending on where in the West End, I think the first answer we would give is stage 2 of the O train is going to take line 1 all the way to Baseline Station, and then what will become line 3 all the way to Moody. And from lines 1 or 3, it's transfer at Herdman to the 45 and then to the, so with the O train, it'll be much faster. I realize that now having to transfer at Tunney's and get on the O train at Tunney's is an additional transfer and additional time. But that's why council invested so much in extending the lines out to the west and southwest.
Thank you, Norma. Did that answer your question?
Yes, it did. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'm just going to take one from the chat. Can you please explain what is intensification?
Sure. So intensification is adding more people, jobs, and buildings to an area in order for there to be, shall we say, a critical mass of people in a neighborhood that allows for services, amenities, local shops to be viable. So intensification, it can be at a very small scale, adding an apartment to an existing house, or building a double of a single, or building a triple instead of a double. Or it can mean things like taking an old gas station or an empty parking lot and putting a new building there. It can mean taking an existing shopping center and adding apartment buildings to it, as you can see at Westgate or Elmvale. It can be building a whole new building where there was a smaller one before. And the official plan says where each type of building should go. So neighborhoods, usually it's low rise. Main streets, it's mid-rise buildings, so 5 to 9 stories, and hubs where we've got the O train stations and the transitway, higher rise locations.
Thank you, Alain. Anne, I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself.
There we go.
There you
Done?
go. Yeah, it's
Okay,
good.
thank you.
You're welcome.
So right now we're number 2 in Canada, and about a third of our population are renters. Where do you see that number growing in the next 10, 20 years?
Okay, thank you. And Alain?
Well, I think generally speaking, Ottawa is enough of a transient city that it will always have a high percentage of renters. We're the nation's capital, so there's people from all provinces that year. The public service comes from far and wide. We're the nation's capital, so there's embassies. So there's people from different countries that come here for short tours of duty. We're a military center. We're an academic center. There's a university, so there's students from other parts of the country and from other countries that come and go. And we're a large center, so we attract from Eastern Ontario, Western Quebec, and other provinces as well. So I think the answer is yes. And we do see it very much as a healthy part of being a growing city.
Oh, I agree. And in fact, to that point, I see a lot of seniors now, 80s, 90s, single woman seniors, and they're cashing out their houses and renting as a choice. It's not like sort of, oh, you have to do this because you're poor. So there's a mindset change going on in that generation. And I think that more of them are going to go to renting too. It's so easy for them. So I think this is all good that we're paying attention to the renters for those reasons.
Absolutely. And we know that there's people already in some of the old that have been renters all their life, and Golden Triangle, Glebe, Sandy Hill. So it's been part of our fabric for forever.
Thank you, Alain. Another question from the chat. How can the city influence landlords and tenants, since the tender of the land is not under its control, but they're under provincial control? So how can the city have influence over the landlords if this is a provincial matter, not a municipal matter?
I mean, it would depend what type of influence we're talking. Obviously, there's the Landlord Tenant Board and the Landlord Tenant Act that governs relations between landlords and tenants, and the official plan doesn't touch that. The plan is under the Planning Act. So it basically guides where buildings go, what type of buildings, what size of buildings, and how people get to move around in the city. I don't know if that answers the question or if there's a follow-up.
We'll just see if they ask me on the chat, and then I'll follow up if I have one. Thank you. I'm just going to go over to Brenda right now. Brenda, please unmute yourself.
Thank you. Good evening. I've got actually 2 questions. I don't know if you can accommodate them. My first one is concerning seniors and the fact that there's a lot of push, I guess, for seniors to retire at home. And the connection I'd like to make, sir, is between the focus to remove parking. If one is going to stay at home, and I'm one of them, and I live in a condo that has a lot of seniors, and there's no parking for the personal service workers to come. And we've got 2 people in here, for example, that need oxygen. Or with pandemic, what we've learned is the absolute crisis of isolation, because there's no place for people to even come and talk in the hall. So this is a concern with this, focus to reduce the parking. But if we want people to retire at home and not have to go into the long-term care facilities, how is that going to be resolved, please?
Excellent question, and I appreciate it being asked. I think the whole point here is to make sure we have a good range of choice, and also that we are applying the right rules to every part of the city. In the suburbs, obviously, people will need to rely on their cars for a lot more because distances are longer and things are more spread out. And for seniors who need to access things by car, we want to make sure that those choices are there. But it's also true that a lot of seniors can no longer drive. And that's equally an issue, because that can also lead to isolation if there are parts of the city where the transit is not frequent enough and where things are very spread out. So I think it's both. There's both sides to the coin. We want to make sure that there's enough choice and that people have the kind of accommodation that they need. Nobody's saying that there shouldn't be no accommodation that has parking. Obviously, we want to have that in the right places and for the people who need it. But it's also true to say that if seniors can no longer drive, they need to be in places where they're reachable close by, and where they can have access to other people and not be isolated without the need to depend on a motor vehicle.
Thank you, Alain. Brenda, I'm just going to circle back to you. Did you have another question?
Yes, I did. If that's okay, if there's other people waiting, I can pass.
No, please.
Okay.
No, go ahead, Brenda.
Thank you. And this question, sir, is in regards to intensification. And, again, I understand that this is a focus of what the city wants to do. But my concern, particularly in Centertown, is, we've got Claridge going up, Main and Main going up, all of these huge buildings going up. And there's a couple things missing that are in your official plan. Number one, no green space. How do we bring in thousands of people and there's no green space? And the developers aren't made to include this in their plans. And then the second part is there going to be a focus to make sure that the amenities we need with all of this intensification, grocery stores, hardware stores, drug stores, are there? So, it's fine to say we're going to have urban growth, but there's other parts that need to go with it that the developers don't seem to be forced to do. Thank you.
Yes, and thank you, Brenda. That's a really good question as well. We noticed as well that with the influx of new population in the downtown core over the past 15, 20 years, that there is a need to look at and make sure that everything else is keeping up in the neighborhood. And so you'll notice in the new official plan, we have much stronger policies on parks in the downtown core. And by the way, if a developer does a new condo building in the downtown core, maybe they're not providing a park on their land, but they're providing money instead of park. And the city gets that money and can use that money to fix up existing parks or get land for new parks. So there's something called parkland dedication that we get out of every development. And we obviously are going to continue doing that. And with respect to the other services, that's something that the councillors on this call have talked to me and my team many, many times about. And it's something that we absolutely want to take to heart. Absolutely, and part of a basic part of the 15-minute neighborhood is making sure that you've got everything else that goes with population growth. So grocery stores, services, and of course we're talking about seniors, but we're also talking about families with kids that may want to live downtown. They need schools, they need daycare, they do need playgrounds. So all these things you'll see in the new official plan are much stronger than in the existing official plan. And we're going to continue to work with City Council to make sure that we pursue these things.
Thank you, Alain. Okay, is that good, Brenda?
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Brenda. Thank you for the question. I'm just going to go to Elisa. Do you want to please unmute yourself? There you go.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi. I'm following up actually to the previous caller about the parking issues. I have real serious concerns about lack of, or any, no parking or lack of parking, like minimal parking in apartment buildings or inside or even outside. To me, it's a no-brainer that we have to have parking, not just for seniors, but there's disabled people, there's families with children, and I don't know about you, but you're not going to get on a bus carrying 6 loads of groceries to come home. And I'm trying to find out why it would not be a criteria for a new developer to in sufficient parking spaces. The example I can give is Rideau Terrace, and they have in or parking. And as the previous caller said, you know, like PSW going up for older clients or people who have, we're in a city that has bad snow plowing at the best of times. People will park on the street. They can't in the winter time. So I'm trying to figure out the logic behind the city of not enforcing developers to have sufficient parking. It's great to push away from parking and choose other modes, but it's not realistic, in my opinion. And then I have a follow-up question.
No, thanks for the question. I mean, it's something that we've looked at very carefully, and there's a difference between requiring a number of spaces versus permitting what the market will support. And that's the approach that we take. Depending on where you are in the city, we do have parking requirements. In the faraway suburban areas, there are parking requirements. But closer to transit, closer to areas where people can legitimately function on foot, it's not that we prohibit parking, but it's an option. Most developers will choose to include parking with what they build, and they know who they're renting to, they know who they're building for. And part of the city, if you're renting an apartment and you know you need parking, that's the first question you're going to ask. So does this building have parking? Usually if the answer is no, well, and you'll move on to the next building that does. But it's equally true that there are people who don't or can't drive and have no need for parking, and to have them have to shoulder the cost, because it's very expensive to provide parking, especially underground, does distort the housing market. So again, it's a matter of choice, and it's a matter of having a range of options for people.
Thank you, Alain. And Elisa, you said you had a follow-up question? There you go.
Regarding intensification, as you may be aware, Alain, I'm in the Manor Park area, and huge concern, because you mentioned in your introduction, you know, that many places would, people would be displaced if a developer comes in to build some new places, and housing would be found. And here there's 650 units that are up for demolition because the developer wants to put in over 9,000 new units of apartment buildings. But where are these people going to go? The 650 that are being displaced, they're at the, are you saying that the city is going to do something, or is it the developer that will have to do something to help these people find equal value, affordable housing? I don't see that.
So I know Councillor King is on.
Developer as being realistic. Sorry.
So sorry, I think your audio cut out. So no, I know Councillor King is watching, and you know, I'll definitely ask him to add a few comments. But what I mentioned is that in the new official plan, we are proposing a new policy that would allow the city to have a system in place to make sure that if there is tenant displacement, that there's protections in place. We don't have that policy in the official plan right now.
Thank you. And just to build on that before I go to Councillor King, a question came in too. Can you please go over the renovation policy overview again? There was nothing in there about the need to provide nearby housing between evictions and move-in to the new building. Is that planned, or is that not in the scope for the policy?
That's a really good question. So what we are proposing is a policy that will allow the city to have a system in place that will address all those things. Right now, we don't. So policy says the city may adopt a framework through which if there's a demolition and there's tenants, that their rehousing is assured nearby, and that they have a right to return to the original location in an apartment at the same price and of the same type. So that's kind of the general intent. But for that to be put in place, the city's going to have to work on a policy that will spell out every single detail of that. And that's something that the new official plan will allow us to do.
Okay, thank you, Alain. Councillor King, do you have a comment?
I do. I just wanted to say that obviously, and I think I speak with the majority of the urban colleagues that are here on this call. We want to move towards policies that ensure that residents are not displaced when we have these redevelopments that occur. So there is some discussion about that. I want you to know, in the context of Manor Parks Estates and that official plan amendment, we are having a number of public meetings. We had a meeting with tenants who live in Manor Park Estates. And the approach of this developer, of this proponent, is a bit different. They are committed to ensuring that people are not displaced, but we'll allow the developer to talk to the strategy that they're going to put in place. So I just wanted to tell Alicia, if you are interested, we can provide you with some information on that meeting that will be held. The next meeting will be held June 7th at 6:30 on the Manor Park official plan, and there will be some discussion concerning Manor Park and the prospect of displacement. But I think that we are working diligently and constructively with that developer to really ensure that does not occur in this scenario. But we would acknowledge that we need stronger policies across the city to really discourage displacement just generally.
Thank you so much, Councillor King, and thank you, Alicia, for your questions. I'm just going to, right now, Alain, I have a few questions about affordability that's come from the chat, and then I will get to the hands, but take these ones. So I have about 6 questions. So Alain, are you ready? Why is the city continuing to approve the building of very large luxury high-rise condos in Centertown, for example, by Gilmore and O'Connor, which will not be affordable?
Well, the buildings, but the city and the official plan don't have the power to say anything about they're not luxury. That's what those developers are building. There are other developers that are doing other types of buildings, but typically, I mean, we know that concrete buildings cost more, and we know that certain builders tend to cater to certain markets and other builders tend to cater to other markets. So there's we can't control through an official.
Okay, Alain, thank you for that. And just on the same topic, could you please explain affordability in the new OP? So how is affordability addressed in the new OP?
The definition of affordability in Canada for decades and decades has been understood as if you're spending 30% or more of your income on housing, you're at the threshold of affordability. So if your housing costs 30% or more of your income, that's unaffordable. It's deemed unaffordable. So what the official plan does is it talks about how to encourage the development of housing that's affordable to up to the 30th income percentile. And as I said before, that usually gets picked up by providers of affordable housing, be it Ottawa Community Housing or the co-ops, or through senior government subsidies. But there's another thing that we were introducing in this plan is a policy that will get the city to look at lands that we own, including land that can contain other city buildings. For instance, libraries, can we build libraries, air rights over transit stations, things of that nature that we weren't doing before. We had a task force, by the way, a couple of years ago to identify a series of city-owned land where affordable housing could be built. And that actually generated a list of solid sites that I know my colleagues are working on right now. And then there's from the 30th to 60th income percentile, which typically is more kind of an open market, but now getting to be more borderline in terms of affordability. What can we do to facilitate the construction of housing that's, not deep affordable, but more affordable? And what I was saying with that is we want to encourage in neighborhoods more variety of housing, so that there is a greater chance that by doing that, those houses will be more affordable. And typically, a lot of them do get rented out. Even a lot of single-family homes are rented in Ottawa. So there's that piece of the market, and a lot of families actually rent either single-family homes or townhouses. So anything that we can do to facilitate the construction of those types of homes in more locations, in our mind, is only going to help.
Okay, thank you, Alain. Still on the affordability. Now the OP says the city wants to see 20% of developments be affordable. Is this the same in the new OP?
Great question. No, it's not the same in the new OP. So the new OP puts in place something called inclusionary zoning. So we're setting up for something called inclusionary zoning. This is brand new. The province of Ontario just barely created this a year ago. And that allows the city to require a certain percentage of new homes to be affordable. So in the new official plan, you'll notice that there's a policy saying this city will adopt an inclusionary zoning bylaw. And then what we have to do, and this is part of a public consultation that's going on right now as well, is through studies, determine, okay, well, what does affordable mean in Ottawa? It's going to be different than in Sudbury or Cornwall or Toronto, right? So what's affordable for Ottawa? And affordable for who? So what kinds of homes are we looking for to be affordable? And then we're going to talk about, okay, well, where is the benchmark? So if you're building a building of 50 units or more, you owe this, 100 units or more, you owe this. So where are the benchmarks? Where are the minimums? So we have to set all that up. And then that'll be part of that new inclusionary zoning bylaw. Province lets us do, and we're going to be the first in Ontario to actually use this inclusionary zoning. Toronto is not far behind us, but we're actually first ahead of them, is we can apply that to the vicinity of transit stations. And like we were saying before, we want to grow the city around its transit system. And we want to have those opportunities pop up where you've got train stations and stations.
Just stole the thunder of the second question, but maybe you can just add to it, is what is the status of the inclusionary zone? You mentioned it's underway. Do we know any of the timeframes?
I don't know them by heart, Charmaine, but we can get back to folks with that.
Okay. Thank you. I know you're being patient, Ray, but I'm just still on affordability. Just have 3 more questions, and then I haven't lost sight of you, Ray. Thank you for your patience. Alain, the new OP mentions a rental replacement policy for the redevelopment of affordable housing. Once the OP is passed, when will the work begin to develop this policy, and do you know the timeline?
I don't know the timeline because it's something that's brand new and council has to approve our work plans. But I've got every indication that they're going to be very interested in getting us cracking on it pretty soon.
Okay, thank you. And Alain, are there new targets for affordable housing for people below the 30% income percentile that you just mentioned?
Through the inclusionary zoning work, those targets will come up.
Thank you. When developers increasingly, again, it's going to the luxury of the heights combined with lack of affordable housing, could the city put in place requirements on developers to rent a certain percentage of the units as affordable options? I know you've just maybe reiterate that. So what is it for developers? What's the percentage of rentals that could be affordable? I know you mentioned that, but could you just reiterate what you said?
Right. No, so that will be the whole work of the inclusionary zoning. The percentage of the apartments in a building that are affordable, that's going to be worked through the inclusionary zoning. So there's open consultation for that, and people can share their views, and the city's going to listen before we present anything to city council.
Yes. And do you know, and I'm putting you on the hot seat, do you know when that consultation will start, Alain?
Again, I would have to get back to people. I don't want to misspeak.
Nope.
I don't have it at my fingertips, unfortunately.
Which is fine, Alain, because we have everyone's email address. We'll get that, and I will send that to everyone once we have that information. Thank you. Okay, Ray, you've been very patient. Please unmute yourself, and what is your question?
Sorry, there I am.
There you are.
Hello, Alain, you have just mentioned inclusionary zoning. And my question has to do with two numbers that are interrelated. I'm a member of Acorn. I'm not an official or anything. I'm just a member, but I do know that when we're looking at the percentage of units that should be affordable under inclusionary zoning, we're asking for 30%. And the other related number to that, of course, is what constitutes an affordable unit. And when we're talking about 30% of a person's income or a household's income being spent on rent, or 30% or less being considered affordable, I would just like to put this in context and point out that people on Ontario Disability Support, and there are a lot of them, individuals receive a shelter allowance $497, and that is more than 30% of their income, which is $196. So would there be any possibility that inclusionary zoning might include as affordable units that are actually down around that number, the shelter allowance for people on Ontario disability? So 30% for affordable units, is that possible? And could some of those units be as low as $400 or $500?
Thanks for the question, sir. I'd like to ask my colleagues who are working on inclusionary zoning maybe to get back to you and to answer some of those questions, because I think that's where those questions are going to be dealt with. What we're doing in the official plan is simply putting in place the policy that will allow the city to adopt an inclusionary zoning policy. So I know I'm not answering, but there's a separate process that will deal with all of that. And it's staff that I can ask to contact you with the details.
Thank you, Alain. And as mentioned, I'll get the details about the inclusionary zoning of when the consultation will begin, and I will send it to the group because it seems to be a lot of interest. Does that probably, it doesn't answer your question, and I apologize for that, Ray, but is that okay?
That sounds all right. I would still have liked some indication of what neighborhood, to make a pun, the amount that would be considered affordable might be in. If it's 30% of the median income for all Canadians, that's far, far more than 30% of the income for many, many low-income individuals. So is there any sense of what that neighborhood might be for the amount that would be considered affordable?
Well, I know I can say that look at inclusionary zoning, the province is going to require that we do, by Ottawa for Ottawa. And for a city of our size, we've got pretty good stats. So income data, we have it for the city at large, and we have it by neighborhood. If we use rent data, CMHC has a number of zones where they do the rental market survey, and we have a lot of data zoned. So we're well equipped to analyze and to answer those questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Ray, for your question. Okay, I'm just a few, and I do see some hands up. I'm just going to get some that are on the Alain, we're on housing type now. I have a few for housing type. What types of policies could the city adopt to promote building more housing for renters? So policy that the city could adapt to promote the building of housing for renters. Alain?
Yeah, I think there's several. I mean, one of the things, as I said before, is when we think of the city, we don't think in terms of owners and renters. We think in terms of housing, and we think in terms of complete neighborhoods. And complete neighborhoods has both owners and renters. Neighborhoods have the things that you need on a daily basis. So the whole point of 15-minute neighborhoods is to make sure that all of our neighborhoods are developing, normally as city neighborhoods should, with that variety and that range. Every neighborhood is different. Every neighborhood is at a different stage of evolution, but basically we want to allow as broad a range of housing types to be built. So some of the things, again, that we do, scale, we let people add apartments to their homes. We let houses on their property. We support mixed-use buildings. So those are the types of buildings that go on main streets where you have stores along the sidewalk, but you have apartments above. We look at city-owned lands and where, apartments could be built above city facilities. We are introducing a number of new hubs and corridors in the new official plan, and those are going to be streets, they're matched with the transit service, and those are going to be streets where we're going to encourage the production of more diverse ranges of housing types. So there's a number of things that we're doing in this new official plan that we weren't so much doing in the former one.
Okay, thank you so much, Alain. And now I have it's still on housing type. Has there ever been, we ever considered to create a centralized rental housing registry that can help support owners and potential tenants find each other in a safer way than currently done privately?
I honestly don't know the answer to the question. I don't know if we considered it before, but if it's an idea that you'd like to submit, we have this email box that Charmaine usually always plasters all over our PowerPoints. It's newop@ottawa.ca. Please share your ideas with us and we'll take them into consideration.
Thank you, Lynn. And I'll just ask someone to post that in the chat. Thank you so much. We're going to still stay on, we're going to talk about landlords. What does the city do about landlords whose business model depends on maximizing cash flow by having high renter turnover and increasing rents rather than capital appreciation?
Well, again, that's a little bit outside of what the official plan would deal with, but in Ontario, there's guidelines for rent increases and people are not allowed to increase rents beyond the guideline. It's kind of a chicken and egg situation. I mean, if there's tenants who are getting out quickly and they vacate apartments, in Ontario, we have decontrol. So an apartment is vacated, then the guideline doesn't apply anymore. The landlord can jack up the rent as much as they want. And there's nothing the official plan can do about it. That's more the landlord-tenant legislation. But by and large, I mean, if tenants are happy where they are and they're happy with the rent that they have, they don't have to move out. And the landlord can't increase the rent any more than what the province allows. And this year, because of COVID, the guideline is 0. There's no rent increase allowed in Ontario.
Thank you, Alain. And I'm just going to go with one more question. And I do see, Badr, I see your hand up. I have not forgotten you. I will be there. Just when you mentioned COVID, I have a question about COVID. Are the changes with COVID being factored into the new OP? Like so the different changes of people working from home and travel and mobility has changed. Has that been taken into account?
Yes, very much. I mean, I'm sure some of you have heard us say this before, but we've had a couple of planners from Ottawa Public Health included in our official plan team from even before COVID. But when COVID hit us, they've become very useful and they've been very busy as well. And they've been keeping track of not only all the numbers, how the pandemic is going, and neighborhoods. So the famous priority neighborhoods and postal codes. But also they've been keeping track of what other cities are doing and what it means for planning policy. And they found a number of things. One of them is obviously came out of the whole COVID is such a strong need for good public space, for good green space, things like linear parks, or being able to close streets so that people can go out and get some fresh air, especially in downtown areas. The experiment last year with Bank Street when it was closed on weekends was very well received and very much appreciated. It highlighted as well that the access to green space is very important. In terms of commuting, obviously we have to wait what happens after COVID passes. We're probably going to need to track what trends play out. There will probably still be workplaces, but if people aren't going to workplaces the same way as before, 9 to 5 days a week, we can anticipate that, without physical distancing, people will be in their neighborhoods a whole lot more and will want to socialize in their neighborhoods a whole lot more. So that is actually going to lend support to the whole 15-minute neighborhood idea. And we can see that there's going to be probably a boost to a lot of neighborhoods. we're concerned about downtown and what's going to happen with the livelihood of downtown. And the official plan still places a lot of emphasis in having a lively downtown with arts, with culture, with nightlife, with information, with a good residential population and services, and good public space. But the whole issue of people going back downtown to work is one that we need to monitor very closely. And obviously what it means for mobility is also going to change. But again, if there's fewer people going back and forth 9 to 5 days a week, perhaps it's a change in how heavy rush hour is. Perhaps it's a change in how we deploy the transit system. So these are things that we have to start to track as physical distance requirements go away.
Okay, thank you, Alain. Just on that point, has the city started communicating with the federal government with regards to the future of on-site work post-COVID and what possibilities this may mean for housing and green space in the downtown core for the next 5 to 10 years and beyond?
I can't speak to discussions between the city and the federal government. I'm not privy personally to any of those, but it changes nothing to our priority to get more green space in the downtown core, to make sure that we improve public space in the downtown core. Those are going to stay as priorities.
Okay, thank you, Alain. Thank you for your patience, Badir. Can you please unmute yourself?
Thank you very much. First of all, I'd like to thank everyone here to give us the chance to listen to us and to be with us. Actually, somebody already mentioned my question, but I'd like to add a little bit to it. So really my suggestion is that the city will charge licensing or registration charge per month, such as $10 in the case on Toronto. That will give the city close with 141,000 rental unit, will give them a budget over $16 million. This will be enough for the city to hire enough inspector and staff. Also doing this will be also a way to track renovations, because if there is a registry, they will be able to track new building ownership, which often means a renovation. Thank you. I think you answered that question, but I thought maybe I'll just add to it.
Thank you so much. Appreciate your comment and thank you for your patience. I'm just going to go to another before. I've got about 30 questions that have come in the chat, which I will get through, but I just want Adele. I know your hand has been up and down. I think maybe you were having IT issues. Adele?
Unmute. Hello, am I there?
Yes, you're here.
Oh,
yes,
okay,
thank you.
Good. I wanted to address the 15-minute neighborhood issue. We have a problem in Ottawa, and I'm not even sure it's municipal jurisdiction. The hospitals are located in such a way that they're far from everything. Like the Queensway Carleton, I don't drive, I'm blind. I have no clue how I get by public transit to the Queensway Carleton. I'm going to the general campus next week. And when I went there for diagnostic work, I cabbed it and it was a half-hour cab ride. So I'm not even gonna, I'm being admitted at 6 in the morning. I won't be taking public transit. I wonder if the city might think about giving this a bit of thought as they upgrade the public transit system.
Okay, thank you for that, Adele.
Yeah, no, thanks very much. We'll make note of the comment, and I would say that it's pretty much at the heart of the strategy to develop a city of proximity and not a city of distance. Maybe I'll loop back to one of the questions at the beginning, which was, what is intensification? Well, it's really developing a city of proximities instead of a city of distance. That's really what it means.
Okay, thank you. And thank you, Adele, for your question. Alain, how will the OP address neighborhoods with high levels of renters, such as Vanier? They have more than 2/3 of renters. Will there be targeted policies for these neighborhoods?
We don't see a high percentage of renters as a problem, for one. I think Vanier is a wonderful neighborhood and it has its own identity and its history, which is one that I think the whole city cherishes. So the answer is no, there's no particular policies that affect neighborhoods that have more or less percentage of renters. If there's neighborhoods that have particular approaches to, let's say, built heritage or other types of, policies in terms of what kind of buildings we want to be building there. We do have a secondary plan for Montreal Road, which is the main drag in Vanier, and we're very happy with that secondary plan. And that's typically the way that the city proceeds with neighborhood by neighborhood, specifics.
Okay, thank you. This is about co-op housing. Has there been any discussion of increasing the number of co-op housing operations or opportunities attempting community-driven land trust? Do initiatives like this have a place in the new OP?
I would say in general they do, but it's obviously up to the groups that are interested in pursuing them to put together their project. And the OP again talks about buildings and talks about housing in general, but we don't distinguish whether it's rental, whether it's co-op, or whether it's ownership. So we would work with whatever group is interested in pursuing a project like this, just to get the building right, to be a good neighbor, to be well placed on its piece of land, and so that it functions logistically well.
Thank you. Well, I see your hand up there, Mary. Just a few more minutes just so I get through some of these questions. Well, family housing is very important. There are people who choose to live on their own and without children. Is the city's plan going to take into consideration that rentals need to be for a variety of people and not just families?
Absolutely, and thanks for the question. There is new language in the new official plan that talks specifically about people who are not in family households, and to make sure that we do recognize their needs. You'll see them in section 4.2, which is housing.
Okay, thank you. This is about parking clarification. Can you please confirm that the revised OP now includes a proposal to eliminate parking minimums? And are we eliminating parking minimums in the downtown and inner urban areas?
So the answer is yes to the first. We do have policies that would allow the city to change parking requirements and reduce them to zero on an area by area basis. That's not something the official plan does. It's something that the zoning does. And as for downtown, well, it's been done already. It's been done 6 or 7 years ago. What we have kept is mandatory visitor parking for high-rise buildings. Because we know that those buildings generate more of the kind of comings and goings that need to be handled on their site. And generally, the result of that has been that you get buildings that are built with just enough parking for what people really need, because the requirements that we had before were way over providing. And that turned out to be both too expensive for developers. And then we at the city, we get these requests from developers to allow for the conversion of those parking spaces to commercial parking, so that it becomes parking for commuters. Instead of taking transit, they come into the downtown, they pay for parking, and it's a way to not take transit. So it's been kind of a fluid situation, but so far in the downtown core, the results have been good.
Okay, thank you, Alain. Thank you for your patience. Over to you. Please unmute yourself.
On the draft official plan, only equity lens is gender, and there's nothing about seniors or older adults, and also people with disabled, and they do overlap. With long-term care being an issue right now, and there really is not enough long-term care beds, the federal and provincial governments are asking, are promoting aging in place, but no real concrete plans how to do that. So I suspect it will be pushed down to the municipalities to solve. And in the plans lasting until for 20 years, which means by 2041, the stats I've seen is that 1 in 4 people in Ottawa will be over 65. And that's something which shouldn't that be an equity lens looking at older adults and associated disabilities and mobility issues? Because when my parents reached like 80s, they're much frailer and walkers, dad's in a wheelchair, he's in long-term care, but there may be people wanting to stay in the community. So how do you facilitate that in the official plan?
Yeah, no, thanks for the question, Mary. So we do have language in the new official plan about what we call complete communities. That's where the whole equity and inclusion lens can be most seen. And that's where we talk about seniors and aging and different abilities. We do have a gender, which we're quite happy about. And that responds to another series of concerns about how we build the city equitably for gender. But I think it's not at the exclusion of the considerations that you're raising. And we're fully aware that the city needs to be welcoming to people at every age and in every type of ability. Again, the concept of intensification in 15-minute neighborhoods is to make sure that people can age in place. In a lot of neighborhoods, there's not a lot of possibilities for people to age in place, meaning to stay in the same neighborhood, but be in a kind of home that suits their need. In other locations, there is that ability, but there's other things missing, like there's parks missing. So again, we've mapped the city in concentric circles and by areas, by transect areas, is going to allow us to do a much better job than with the existing official plan at really targeting the right policies at the right places, see what the problems are in each direction or in each area of the city, and aim the right policies at each of those areas.
Yeah, Mary, clarification?
Yeah, I think I brought it up in the Big Five moves and 15-minute neighborhood consultations before, is that the 15-minute neighborhood, there's a kind of base assumption it's a healthy adult. And it's a lot different radius if it's a elderly person or somebody in wheelchair, for example. How do you bring an equity lens into that?
Thanks for the question, actually. So we thought a long time about that. And I think what you'll find is in the mobility section of the plan, we've got much beefier policies that talk about equity and mobility. So we give a number of new policies to the design of streets, making sure that every user of the street and the public space in general is properly accommodated. And again, it goes by context. There's some parts of the city where that works well. There's other parts of the city where you need a little bit more, but it's not that far away. You just need that extra little nudge. There's other parts of the city where there's a lot of work to do. And we have to determine, well, what is the work that needs to be done? What are the first things that we need to do? Where do you start in order to have that start to spread and reach more parts of neighborhoods? So I would say, look at section 4.1, which is mobility. There's a long list of things that we are saying we should be doing with respect to streets and public space, and by transect as well. And we think that that's going to really help us when we talk to our friends in transportation, in terms of how streets are designed. And we know as well, I mean, of course, the official plan is an umbrella. It mostly deals with buildings. It deals with streets as well. It deals with mobility, but there's a number of other things that the city does in terms of maintenance and winter maintenance. And we want this to be everybody's official plan, obviously. So, I mean, with the aging of the population, these questions become important, not just for, new development, but for everything else that the city does.
Okay, thank you, Ellen. Thank you, Mary, for your question. We do have 8 minutes left, and I have, I think, 8 questions. And if I haven't gotten to your question, no worries. We will take the questions, do the response, and everyone who is registered, we will send those questions out. So Alain, this one, do the number and types of bridges between Ottawa and Gatineau come under the OP? I live in Somerset and I commute to Gatineau by bus or by bike. How and where can we cross the river has a big impact on the workday? So is that
Right.
something that you take into account?
We take into account, but it's not really on the official plan. Bridges across the Ottawa River are a multi-jurisdiction matter. So obviously the federal government has a very important role, the 2 provincial governments and the 2 municipalities. I can say that we've been in very close contact with our colleagues at the city of Gatineau. And actually, for the first time ever, you will see a map in the Ottawa official plan that outlines the metropolitan downtown core, which takes in the downtown of the city of Ottawa and the downtown of the city of Gatineau in a single map. It's not that we're giving policy to Gatineau or the other way around, but we're showing it in a map to be able to show crossings, to be able to see where streets end up on the other side, and to be able to coordinate. We know that there's a transit study going on to integrate the Gatineau system into Ottawa. And so again, the official plan's role is to reserve corridors where there is potentially a bridge, and to talk about how we want to prioritize the types of movements between provinces. And obviously we put emphasis on transit and sustainable modes.
Okay, thank you, Ellen. This one is in regards to intensification. Much of the land use in Ottawa presently is very inefficient. For example, surface parking in Centertown, for example, the parking in Centertown, the surface parking, what are the mechanisms in place in the new OP to incentivize redevelopment to support the plan's intensification objectives?
Well, the first thing to say is that the Centertown secondary plan is being brought back. And the Centertown secondary plan has a lot of very important policies. First of all, no new surface lots are allowed. So the old practice that used to be done in the 60s and 70s of knocking a building down and then paving it over for parking so that commuters can park there all day, we don't do that anymore. Then it becomes a question of, well, what parking lots are we talking about? Some of them are contaminated, and therefore to get them built, it's more, and there's things that need to be done to clean up the land. In other cases, it's simply the owner's been there for a long time and doesn't want to sell. So Councillor McKenney, I think, is intimately with many of them. Fortunately, I mean, we can say over the past 15, 20 years, a lot of them have been turned into housing. So basically, the biggest incentive we can do is to allow people to build housing is very lucrative downtown. Unfortunately, and this speaks to a lot of the questions that came up before, a lot of that tends to be luxury housing. So it's expensive housing. It's not necessarily affordable housing. And the city does pursue affordable housing projects when they can get land in the downtown core. When we have inclusionary zoning, the entire downtown core is a protected major transit station area. So inclusionary zoning will apply to the downtown.
Okay, thank you, Ellen. I'm going to change the topic here. It's going to be about bikes. Is security considered in the plan for bicycle racks? Many have no choice but to store bikes outside, and bicycle theft in Ottawa is a huge issue for people who depend on this mode of transportation.
Yeah, actually, you know, I've owned the same bike since 1987, and I have to be one of the only ones in Ottawa that's been that lucky. And it's probably because I don't repaint it, I don't clean it, it doesn't look attractive, and it doesn't look like people want to steal it, but I'm one of the few. So I know, and I know it's a painful thing in Ottawa. So yes, we do have policies in the new official plan that talk about bike parking. We want to get more sophisticated about that. We want to talk about short-term bike parking. So if you're going to the store, where do you leave your bike? And residential bike parking. So if you live in a building and you own a bike and you want to use it for daily, you know, going back and forth, it shouldn't be in the third basement of the parking garage. It should be at street level. It should be easy to get in and out of a building, and it should be convenient. So again, these are things that are going to end up in zoning, but what you'll see in the plan is the language that says zoning should start to talk about these things, so that when we are dealing with bike parking, we know what we're talking about and we can give the right rules.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to talk just a few questions. I know I've got 3 minutes. Green space. Does green space, so I mean, is there a plan for adding more parks in as intensification continues, even parklets? And with that, adding to that, would that include dog parks? So is there going to be more green space? Will it be even parklets, especially in the downtown core? And which, and what about dog parks?
So the answer is so there's a new policy in this official plan specifically saying that the city has to be looking for new land for parks in the downtown core. We know we've got a couple of big ones coming up in LeBreton Flats. There's going to be a big one in a few neighborhood parks. So LeBreton Flats is going to be built with new parks. The other thing that we do is, because land is smaller in the downtown core, when you've got whole city blocks that are going to redevelop, Voyager Station, for instance, Voyager Station block, we would look for pieces of those lands to be either public parks or what we call publicly privately owned public spaces. So anybody can use them, but it's owned by the condo next door or the building next door, and are obliged by the city to maintain it and keep it open for people to use freely. So they can't fence it off, and it has to be used. So there's one being built right now at the corner of Rideau and Chapel, and there's a few more coming up.
Okay, thank you. Last question. I see Councillor Fleury's hands up, and then I'll go for some closing remarks. I'm wondering if there's a plan to incentivize landlords of existing rentals to make their units more energy efficient. So are we helping the landlords make sure that their units are energy efficient?
I think we want to help any building owner, not just landlords. And the city has an energy evolution plan that I would invite everybody to check out. We have, again, council approved goals to go to zero emissions by 2050. And in a city like Ottawa, the two big things that we need to transform are buildings, we heat and cool them, and then transportation. We have to go to non-combustibles. So please check out the energy evolution, and there's a whole strategy there that council's approved. And it's going to be a lot of hard work. There's, as you can imagine, thousands and thousands and thousands of buildings that have to be changed. It's one of these big changes, like last century, we went from coal to fuel oil, and then from fuel oil to natural gas. In the 21st century, we go from combustibles to non-combustibles. So that's what we call the energy evolution strategy.
And thank you. I just put that in the chat. And so if folks want to see where we're at with the energy evolution, thank you for that. So that's our last it is 8:30. So I will go to Councillor Fleury, the other councillors for closing remarks. Any questions that were not answered today, please be patient. We have them all. We will go through them. We will, everyone that we have your email address, we will send them out, but I'm just going to manage expectations. It will take us a few weeks to do that, but I thank you. Councillor Fleury? Please unmute yourself. There you go.
Charmaine, there was a really good number of questions that intertwine with parks. And as you know, another group is working on the parks master plan, and there's consultations that are being held next week. So I wonder if you'd be able to put in the chat the Engage Ottawa link so that renters this evening could fill the survey if they're not available next week, or join us for the session next week on facilities and parks.
Thank you very much, Councillor Fleury. And I think we've just put that in the chat as well. So thank you so much. Okay, so I'm just going to now, I want to thank everyone for your coming out this evening and spending this time with us. And I would like to thank the councillors for, arranging this as well, working with us. I'll just go over to Councillor Kavanagh first for some closing remarks. Over to you, Kavanagh.
Thank you very much, Charmaine and Alain and the whole team who put this together. It was great to have the presentation, and it's great to have the focus on renters. In fact, it's kind of odd that renters may not feel welcome at our regular ones. Maybe they're dominated so much by homeowners. So I appreciate that this is a space, particularly for those who rent, because it's a big part of our population. A very important part. So it's very important to have that flexibility. And I think the message I heard tonight is we need choices. We need flexibility and choices. We need all kinds of rental. We need rental for families. We need rental for singles. We need a lot of rental for seniors. I'm aware of that in the end of town. So these are all choices, and affordability, of course, is very, very important. And it's probably a big reason why many use rental for that reason. We want to keep it that way. Hope to have more of it. We hope to have very good rental, good quality. And I think that came up very loud and clear, that it's not just building it, it's making sure that it works for people. So I want to thank everyone for coming out and asking questions. They were really good questions, and I appreciate your attendance and your interest in this. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor. And now over to you, Councillor Menard.
Oh, thanks very much for holding the session, for attending today. It's nice to see so many people out for this. To staff, a good presentation on all of this and answering those questions. Very much appreciated. The things I'm keeping an eye on in this new official plan and where we go from here are a few. Inclusionary zoning is one. The details come from that. You know, what percentage of units will be mandated to be affordable? What is the definition of affordable? How is this going to work with developers who have a profit motive? That's going to be important. The question around the rental replacement section, I think this is great that staff have put this in the official plan. It sets the stage for a bylaw, and to make sure we're proactive, and not just slow down the loss of rental units, but increase them. I think on that score, the Airbnb rules that we've approved do a good job of looking to add more term back to the market. So what return to the long-term market are we going to be seeing from those new Airbnb rules, which are under appeal right now at LPAT, but eventually will come in, we hope. So we'll see what happens there. And then just a couple points that, you know, supply side solutions are not going to solve our problem. They don't affordable crisis. We can say we can build all we want, but you know, expanding the urban boundary historically, for example, has not led to more affordable housing. That's a fact. So from, you know, the vacancy rates, we know supply is not the issue either. So really, at the end of the day, it's public housing. That's what's going to help the affordability crisis that we see. The city, I think, needs to stop selling off public lands, thinking about more of the land that we can contribute to for affordable living, and really push for more public housing in our city. So I'll be looking for those pieces in the official plan as we move along. I think there's a lot of good starts here in the official plan that can lead to a lot of the positives that I've been talking about. So appreciate tonight, and thanks everyone for attending.
Thank you so much, Councillor. And now for final words, over to Councillor Leeper.
Thank you very much, Charmaine, and thank you very much to staff for assisting this evening and putting this presentation together. I can only echo what Councillor Kavanaugh said, which as councillors often approached most often, except maybe for Councillor McKenney, by homeowners. And oftentimes the thrust is to try to preserve things the way they are. And I think that sometimes renters have a different perspective on their community that absolutely needs to be heard. And for that reason, I am thrilled this evening that we were able to undertake this. Heard a lot of really interesting things around how to move around the city, the affordability of the city, you know, stuff like that. I think I would just want to wrap up on saying you're all invited to learn more about the planning process. There's a lot of discussion in this evening's presentation about processes that are going to happen after the official plan is passed. Specific plans, specific bylaws that are actually going to be a part of the official plan. And it's important as stakeholders in how our city is being built, how it's going to grow, how it's going to evolve, that you stay involved over time. I would like to encourage everybody to consider taking what the city calls the planning primer. And I see that has been put into the chat. Planning primer talks about how our city is planned overall, and it's really useful information for advocates and for residents who are interested in staying engaged with these kinds of discussions. This is really exciting times for city councilors, for residents, for staff. We are pushing the envelope in so many positive ways with this official plan, which is a very different official plan than what we've had since amalgamation. And I very much hope that many of you who have taken the time to be here and to share your perspectives with us are going to stay with us for a few more years over the long haul, while these big vision, the big vision of the official plan gets turned into actual policy that is going to help everybody make a better city in future. So I will just leave it with that. And Charmaine, thank you very much. Thank you very much to your team for this. Alain, thank you very much. And thank you very much, everyone, for joining us this evening.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Councillor Leeper. I'd like to thank Councillor Menard, Councillor Kavanaugh, Councillor Fleury, Councillor King, and Councillor McKinney. Thank you so much for attending this evening. And of course, thank you. I always feel privileged to have the opportunity. I feel like I'm welcomed into your home. And so thank you so much for attending. I hope everyone's safe and enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.